Welcome to Love and Life. I'm Dr. Karen Anderson Abril here with my co-host,
Pastor Elliott Anderson.
And Love and Life is your place to hear conversations grounded in psych research, psychotherapy,
and biblical truth
to help us thrive in love and life. Elliott, I'm back with you.
Kind of.
Yeah, not really, huh? I'm on the road. For anyone watching, right. I'm literally in the truck with Dan, and we are going to visit his mama in Muncie, Indiana. But I am back on the program. Yay. Tim, thank you so much for subbing in. You guys did a great job. I loved, actually, I texted Tim. I'm like, you're like a therapist. So I don't know what's going on. If Elliott's been such a good therapist for you, or
honorary title, honorary.
I'm saying,
right.
Or like you just have some instincts that just continue to be cultivated, which is a beautiful thing. So anyway, I loved the episode. Of course I had thoughts. I also loved that Elliott gave me feedback that some of his clients listened and said, I was really curious what Karen would say about that.
That's right.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you that you missed my input. I appreciate that. So no, really, thank you guys always for the input that you give us on all the realms, because we love knowing that what we're talking about is resonating with you. And of course, we always say, and we'll say it again, please make sure that you're sending us any questions, any thoughts, any topics you want us to cover. And of course, I did have some thoughts. Also, sidebar, for those of you who opened up the newsletter, thank you for reading it. Apparently, I'm an external processor via text. And so I need some clarification on that at some point in this episode, Elliott.
It's not just text. It's anytime you're communicating, it's external.
Yeah. I have a lot of things to say.
Yes, you do. You do.
And as the youngest child to two bossy older brothers, my opportunities to talk were limited for the first 18 years. So now I am kind of
now you have a bossy husband as well.
Yeah, he is bossy. He handles me. Oh my gosh, he was handling me this morning.
He had to, or you'd be late.
Well, we were still, yes, exactly. Anyway, so the first thing I wanted to say though, Elliott, was I thought that was really very great, advice, so to speak, because what is so counterintuitive, and I used to teach this with my counseling skills and techniques and interventions course, we always think when we're communicating with friends, romantic partners, anyone, we always assume that we have to ask the right question to get the right information, or we have to like word something in a way. And like, I don't want to ask this, but I really do want to ask this. We assume that a conversation must involve a lot of questions in order to keep it moving and to keep information forthcoming. And your point was that in some cases, it's actually best to come up with statements as opposed to questions. Not only do you don't feel like you're being interrogated or that you're interrogating the person. And I've been on the other end of that. I think we've all been in a situation where someone's asking questions from a lovely place of genuine curiosity, but we feel like, okay, why am I in front of the firing squad of interrogation here? Or like you're in the police room with like the one light bulb hanging down in the interrogation room. So people don't realize that inadvertently they could put someone on the defense with questions, even though they're coming from pure place. So I love that you highlighted that. And then you found something that you shared with Tim and me a couple of days ago that really reinforced and took it to the next level. But getting back to my counseling skills and interventions class, I used to, the very first assignment, I would have the grad students just call up a friend or anyone or to have a conversation with their husband over dinner, and don't tell them what they're doing, but refuse to ask any questions.
Yes.
Rather, just reflectively listen. So restate what the person said to them. Oh, it sounds like you're feeling ABC, and watch how much momentum that the conversation will have, despite their belief that I must ask a question at some point or else the conversation will die, and how incredibly heard and validated the person they're talking to will feel. And I had so many fun experiences where the students would come back next week and be like, yeah, I called up my cousin and we were just talking. I asked no questions. I just listened reflectively. It was 45 minutes and I needed to get off the phone because cousin would not shut up.
Yeah.
Which they never thought would happen unless they were asking questions. Initially, that was their assumption.
And in one reflection from last week, we always listen to ourselves to critique and to think of other sidebars. We need to go down this avenue, down this avenue. The one I thought of, I did not share as specifically as I wanted to, even though I was teasing Tim about his firstborn nature of question clarification. even though I know he knows where he wants to go ahead of time. He pretends like he's going to let you and I as the randomers just go all over the place.
He's
But
pretending?
no, at times he knows he's
I
going to
never
gently steer.
knew.
He's going to gently steer.
I'm learning so much about myself right now too, so I'm right there with you.
But anyway, my point was, and it's not the case with Tim, but when positional authority is there or expertise is there, so we're in a therapy session where you or I are the therapist for a client, we might not feel like we have all this power, but we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so anytime there's positional influence of status, position, birth order, Dan is a owner of a business talking to guys well underneath him. Again, the least amount of questions you can possibly ask, unless you have to know a specific detail about something very important to the operations. But the more statements you can make, the more people feel on the same page with you, same value. Like, yeah, Elliott's my trauma expert therapist, but he also cares about me as a person. And how do I know that? Just by his reflective listening and statements rather than nonstop questions.
Okay, I love that. And I think because we're doing a little counselor talk, a reflective listening, I think we could give some examples of that just because I think it's always a good refresher for anyone.
Yes.
Probably people have learned I statements and reflective listening techniques at some point in their career or in their counseling, their own therapy or whatever. It's probably good to reiterate it. Let's do that. And then we'll play the clip because that guy goes next level. Does that sound okay?
Yeah. And the Rogerian technique of reflective listening is at this point the counseling foundational training.
Mm-hmm. This is like counseling 101.
So that's a big part as well. Mm-hmm. Even though I didn't go that direction as a crisis therapist, we're very much solution focused and very directive. But you and I were both trained in good places and trained in the reflective listening movement. So if you want to explain Rogerian reflective listening, I will give you my tidbits after you give the more textbook oriented, research oriented explanation.
Yeah, so it's based on Carl Rogers and his person-centered therapy, which has also been called humanistic, but that's not to mean that it's just humanism, again, which is also kind of lumped in with secularism, which can be opposed to Christianity in some realms. So we're going to take all of that kind of philosophy out of it and just look at the way that a person-centered or client-centered, I think he ended up calling it later, in if that sounds right, Elliott, is the idea that the client. So that now I'm talking as if we're all becoming therapists, which I don't think it's a bad idea for us to think of that all of us can learn from these therapeutic techniques and interventions. One of the reasons I wanted to start the podcast is because I thought of all the things I was teaching as a professor, and I thought, gosh, I think everyone can benefit from learning this, not just a psych major. But so Rogers, as your therapist, is going to approach the session assuming that the client knows the solution. He's just going to hold up a mirror for the client, create a space in which the client can feel heard, validated. And because of that space of validation and support and affirmation, unconditional positive regard was one of the terms he used. The client will therefore have that healing context, healing environment. The therapist isn't really going to do anything, like to your point about solution focus. There's going to be more direct intervention in a Rogerian or a client-centered context. He's really going to just provide that space, hold space for the person so that they can come to their own solutions, which because the therapist, the Rogerian therapist, believes in their ability. It's a very validating, empowering, I would say, because it's assuming, hey, I'm here to support you in this process, but I believe in your ability to come to your own solutions for your life, knowing your own values and your own dreams and desires and goals in life. So I'm just going to help you walk hand in hand with this. Whereas some of the other orientations would be a little bit more directive, like, hey, I am, like you said earlier, I am someone who knows a little bit more about this and let me help you. More didactic, more teacher, student vibe to a degree. Anyway,
yes, and since
go ahead.
Since we've been in a trauma recovery series, and so much of my work is trauma based. When people are stuck and frozen in the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, or have so many trauma memories and so much trauma blocking that they're truly not functioning, that's why I can't go into Rogerian reflection, because they're completely paralyzed. And so I have to find ways to make statements and directions and sometimes poke and prod to kind of help them regulate, settle, get to that window of tolerance. And then as the therapy goes on, after we get out of the initial crisis, then I can do much more Rogerian and say, well, let's talk about what worked for you a month ago. What happened there? Just give me a little feedback. And that kind of allows them to start doing the process that we both know is extremely good, even if it's not my natural style all the time.
Yeah. And most therapists end up with what we call an eclectic approach, meaning that they will pull from different orientations based on the need at hand. And like you said, crisis really involves, it's acute. We got to solutions need to happen now. We don't necessarily have the luxury of for someone being like, oh, I'll come to therapy for 3 to 4 months to figure out what I want to do with this relationship that's not working. Something along those lines. Anyway,
abuse or something going on. Yep.
Yeah, right. So there's something that's crisis, like we said. So it needs to be more directive action taken immediately. But what I love about Rogers is that when you learn these skills, like I was saying, and even with my students, my counseling students, I love that these tools are such that we can use them and enhance any relationship we're in. And they're not hard, but they are a bit counterintuitive, like we said at the top, because we assume we need to ask questions to gain information. And in fact, we don't. So let me give you an example. Elliott, we'll do a little example of a Rogerian intervention, which is, again, very basic. And it's a quick little fix you can change. And the person that you're speaking with will probably feel more heard and understood than they have in a very, very long time.
All right. So Dr. Karen, I'm calling because I'm just a little frustrated. I'm tired. It's the end of the school year. I got a ton of grading to do. I got to drive to Michigan this weekend. I got family coming in the weekend after that. I'm just feeling a little overwhelmed.
What specifically is going on?
Well, I feel like there's just not enough time in my day. There's just not enough hours to get everything done, and I'm getting behind.
What could you do to reorient your schedule?
Well, I could probably sit down and draw it all out and see if there's blocks of time that are being wasted or somehow not as efficient.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a great plan. I'm so glad I was able to help you today.
Okay, I'm done. Thank you. That was more solutions focused to me. That you were getting to the point.
No, exactly. That's my point. I was doing the question response to show how, in a way, it can be like question, and expect that the solution will be there. Done. I'm not saying that's
I understand. I did feel a little bit of pressure. It was weird, even though I'm in that kind of pressure all the time. But just your direct questions did make me feel a little pressure.
Right, because it's like
I had to have some kind of answer quick.
Right, let's get to this. So it was the opposite of creating a space where you could just kind of let me just get this off my chest and that kind of thing. Although again, it was solution focused vibes, but it wasn't a true solution focus.
No, not at all.
I wouldn't want, because solution focus is much more powerful and much more affirming than that. Anyway, so come at me with the same question again, and I'll give you a reflective listening response.
Yes, Dr. Karen, I'm just a little overwhelmed. There's too much going on. I'm way behind in grading, got presentations to get through. I'm just feeling stuck.
Sounds like there is so much happening right now. It's really hard to sort through feeling the pressure of these deadlines, end of the year stuff. There's so much, there's pressure because you got graduation coming up, your students, your daughter, so much happening. It just sounds very overwhelming.
Yeah, it is. I'm just feeling stretched too thin, and I'm getting frustrated, things that aren't even that serious.
Yeah. And then it just piles on. And so there's like this, which you maybe could handle 1, 2, or 3, but now you got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 big ticket items on your plate at the same time. And part of you is feeling probably that, like, can I even make it all? Even though I know I can handle a lot, this is maybe burning the candle on so many ends that you're starting to wonder if you're even capable of getting through this.
Yeah, absolutely. There could be some balls dropped. I can do some extra work here and there, but I'm going to have to work overtime just to get through this particular season.
Yeah, and that feeling of overwhelm is exhausting too. So it's just these emotions of like, okay, normally I'm feeling pretty competent, even though I have a very busy schedule and I juggle a lot. But now it's feeling like, is this going to be something that's going to be too much? And then wondering, even in the midst of the intensity of all these, there's still excitement and celebration. And will you not feel the fullness of the celebration because it's just so darn stressful right now?
Yeah, the stress is making me not stay present enough. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So that's an example of where I never once asked you a question to get more information,
Nope.
and yet you continued to give me more information. And I gave an example of trying to give a feeling for you. You were a nice, very astute client. You knew your feelings and you shared them. Sometimes clients won't. Or again, let's bring this back to the friendship and relationship realm, since we're not necessarily trying to get anyone to have a client load, but a case load. But the idea is that if someone comes to you and they're speaking, some of our friends and family members and loved ones are very intellectual. They're in their heads a lot. And they may be talking about all the things they have to do and not really even saying, like you, being more in touch with your emotions, we're able to say, it's feeling overwhelming. So sometimes what we can do in reflective listening is offer a feeling. And then, and don't be too freaked out if the feeling isn't right, because we're going to be like, oh, I want to, like early when we're first in this reflective listening process, we were like, I want to nail the right feeling and make sure that I heard them and they know I heard them and that I heard the exact feeling. Because if your friend or your partner in the relationship, if you suggest a feeling that's not quite right, they will still feel heard and they'll be like, well, it's not so much overwhelm. It's just maybe a sadness that I can't be as fully present because of so many distractions. And I want to be present in this very exciting time of my daughter graduating and blah, blah, blah. So that I want to just offer that word to invite people to not be scared to name a feeling, because your friend, loved one, partner will correct you and they will still feel heard.
Yeah, for sure. And I, as you were reflecting, and it's interesting because people could probably tell, I mean, we've both said before, we're both external processors anyway, but you were talking as much as I was talking.
Yeah.
But it was still reflectively even adding layers or depth to what I was saying. And because you do have some understanding of that exact type of feeling yourself, without going into all kinds of self-disclosure, you were 100% helping me feel that you really understood what I was experiencing.
A few years ago, I started having trouble falling asleep. And I started taking melatonin because I thought it was a natural way to try to relax myself, calm myself down, and go to sleep. But it turns out that as a hormone supplement, melatonin can disrupt our other hormones and we can build up an immunity to it. So when we started partnering with the wellness company, I was super excited to try their melatonin-free sleep aid called Restful Sleep. It includes passion flower, chamomile, valerian root, among other herbs and natural ways to help calm us down and get us ready to go to bed. I've been using it for a couple months now, and Restful Sleep helps my mind and body quiet themselves and ease into sleep. If you've ever had insomnia, you know how brutal it is. The wellness company's Restful Sleep can help. Head over to twc.health/lovelife and enter promo code LOVELIFE at checkout for 15% off your entire order. That's twc.health/lovelife and promo code LOVELIFE for 15% off your entire order.
Yeah. And thank you for that additional point. Cause like I was saying, like there were times when I was like, is he worried about dropping the balls? Or, he's pretty good at, I mean, obviously you're my brother. I know you, the Love and Life community knows you as well. So is he worried about dropping the balls? And then I was like, I'm going to throw it out there and see if he is. And it wasn't so much that, but it was the not feeling present. And then when you shared that, then I could like reflect on that too. And then think about, I mean, obviously Paige is graduating. So then I was thinking, if I'm you, so I'm putting myself in your shoes, and that's what reflective listening helps us do. If I'm sitting here listening to you, my brother, my friend, my partner, whoever, and I'm worried about the next question I'm going to ask, that puts me in a state of not being fully present to listen. Right. And then you offered that you were afraid of not feeling fully present. And then I offered later, like, that would you be worried that the excitement of Paige's graduation, for example, and the celebration therein would be diminished because of all these other things that were stressors? And so then you were like, yeah. So again, this was just kind of just a little quick off the cuff role play, but I hope that helps again reaffirm what you were saying in the last episode of how the power of statements, and in this case, a reflective statement, takes the pressure off us to always feeling like we need to craft the perfect question to get the information we're interested in. And in fact, realizing that sometimes we'll get more and deeper information if we just do that reflection statement.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's play that clip now, because that'll even take it to the next level.
Statements are always going to be better than asking pointed questions because a person feels like they're volunteering information. So let's say I wanted to ask if you just got back from vacation and I didn't want to use any questions. Let's say we meet up for dinner or something, and I said, you look like you just got back from a vacation. That's a statement. And you're like, no, actually, I've been doing this, 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 and this. So now you've given me more than if I just asked if you were on vacation. And I said, wow, that had to be interesting. I can't imagine that. There's got to be a lot of stuff going on there. And you start talking more and more and more. And then, like, that sounds great. There was no challenges to that entire trip. I love when everything is 100% flawless. And you're like, no, well, actually, and then you start going into that. And I'm like, no way. Then now we have disbelief that comes in. And I haven't asked a single question yet. So that's one thing that I challenge everybody that I train to get really good at, is that elicitation piece. How many layers can I get into a person or a conversation just using these statements? But that elicitation is so powerful because we're not being asked questions. So our brain doesn't set off little security alarms. And this is how Soviet spies would get information from a 19-year-old US Navy sailor in the early days of the Cold War. Ship would pull into Thailand, or a submarine would pull into Thailand or Singapore. Then a Russian would go up and these sailors would be drinking at the bar. Russian would sit there. He's got a Aloha shirt on or something, and strike up a conversation. They say, I know that the German submarines could outrun you because their propellers are 22 and all of your submarine propellers are 18 feet in diameter. And the sailor, slightly drunk, turns around and says, no, they're not, and starts giving up all this information just to correct the record.
So that's next level.
And I love the elicitation framework. And again, I just stumbled I can't remember his name, but he's a behavior analyst expert and does a lot of work with like Secret Service kind of stuff for companies and trying to diagnose and assess whether someone's lying or not and all those type of things. But I love the recognition that you're not trying to get info out of people per se. In the therapeutic conversations we're talking about, we're trying to get heart to heart, mind to mind, soul to soul intimacy. And in particular, parents out there like us with Gen Z kids, they hate questions and they don't give us a darn thing when we ask a bunch of questions. And learning how to get these statements and elicit some feedback or commentary. My boys are both oppositional by nature, which is very similar to me. So it's not hard for me to do this at all. You know, we both know this. Dan's done it for fun, I'm sure, with the boys too. Is all you have to do is say Jordan's better than LeBron and just sit back and wait. You're just going to get an enormous amount of information. But you can just, instead of asking them, hey, where are you going and who are you going with? If I say something like, wow, that game was a good one, huh? And then all of a sudden it's going to get to, well, I actually didn't go to the game. I ended up going with these guys and hanging out there instead. Now, the moment I would have asked Jacob where he's going or something, his first response is, I want my own space. I want my own safety. I'm not necessarily going to give you that information. But if I throw out a potential statement of, he loves to go to games. Did you go to that game? A direct statement, he might say no and give me nothing. But if I said something just as a statement for an elicitation, that game must have been pretty cool to watch. It could induce the exact same opposition, but it doesn't. Then he actually counters it, like the expert was talking about. It counters the information and goes, no, I didn't go to the game. I went here instead. Where if I'd asked him where you went or where you're going, I probably wouldn't have got it. And so that happens in counseling, Karen, all the time.
I bet.
And doing the feedback piece, when someone unloads, I had one yesterday, was a half hour of just 10 minutes in, I wanted to weep. And I had 20 more minutes of hearing this woman. She's older than I am. Her story of ongoing sexual abuse and sexual trauma. It was just one after another after another. And again, I didn't have to ask a single question. She was ready to unload and share and talk. But I just kept giving the affirmation statements. Oh my goodness, that must have been so difficult. Right? So what happens? We get done with this. This is the first session. We get done with like 50 minutes. I can't believe how helpful you've been, Pastor Elliott. I had barely done a thing except honor her pain, affirm her sadness, and literally resonate with how traumatic those repeated sexual abuses and rape and things were that all of us would understand are horrific. And so that's in a crisis mode. But if we just learn, like your class used to teach and the classes I teach, Intro to Counseling, just teaching them therapeutic conversations, I take the stigma away. Quit trying to think of these perfect questions. Quit trying to think of the way to get in and make this scenario work. Just learn how to listen, learn how to share, reflect, give statements, give illustration, and move from there.
Elliott, that example is exactly why I wanted us to elaborate on this, because you were able to use a technique where a woman in deep amount of pain was sharing horrific trauma, and you just kept validating that must have been excruciating. That must have been demoralizing. That must have been so heartbreaking. And it's still heartbreaking. It's still understandable why you would feel every emotion or whatever. And you probably said 5 words the whole time. And she felt it was healing. That's my point. She felt heard.
Yeah.
She felt seen. She felt validated. She felt affirmed, and it was healing. That is healing. Feeling those feelings is healing.
She actually checked on me at one point. She actually said, "Are you doing okay?"
Oh.
And I was totally fine. Sometimes I've cried with clients, right? It's really deep,
Sure.
heavy stuff. But in this case, I think I was just practicing, and I imagine myself, I'm driving in my truck through Elgin, right? And so I'm not face to face with her. I'm not sitting there. I can't give her all those nonverbals that are so important. So I'm doing it in my tone. I'm being extremely empathic in my tone. And I think I was expressing so much warmth and care. She thought I was crying. And so what I said when she checked on me is like, I am doing fine, but thank you for checking so much. That is so sweet of you in the midst of your pain to wonder how I'm doing. And I said, there might be times in our future, because I knew this was coming. There might be times that I will be moved to tears based on all the tough stuff you're telling me. And I know I don't even know a tenth of the story yet. But I allowed that opportunity for her question to be another point of, yes, we can resonate and connect heart to heart.
Yeah, and that just gets me back to, since we're doing a little bit of a counseling 101 lesson here, it gets me back to the power of the relationship. And there's so much research that shows that we've been talking about these different orientations, ones that are more directive, ones that are more reflective, like Rogerian, which we're focusing on today. But despite the orientation used, there's many, many, many research studies that show that it's the power of the relationship. And that, what you just shared, is such a great example of that bond that forms between therapist, client, where to the point where she's even like, your connection is now so genuine and so healing for her that she was then able to have, even in the midst of this expression of immense grief and pain, because she was already feeling heard and seen and validated, and the healing was already happening. She was able to then offer you a little, just like, are you okay?
It's very sweet.
That's
very
amazing.
Sweet.
That just speaks to the power of the client therapist relationship. I love that example. Thanks for sharing that.
And I think our words, Karen, need to be partnered with our nonverbals. Right. And so I teach in my class, I'm sure you've done similar. I teach a lot about pacing and open posture and removing barriers between you and the client, if at all possible. We're not going into the Freudian sit behind a big desk with your feet up and, and have 12-foot moat between you and the client, trying to have openness with our posture, and that the warmth is communicated in your voice. And so you really need to care. I tell my students, you don't have to care about the issue right away. You might not even care about it once it comes out, but you got to care about the person. And if you don't, that's hurting your voice. That's hurting your, same thing with when I've been a vice president and talking to folks that I had to discipline or people I had to fire. You still got to care and still can have warmth, even if you're saying, listen, here's the boundary that was crossed. Here's the situation that we're dealing with here that is, according to our handbook, disciplinary by probation or suspension. Here's the decision the team and I made, and here's the result. But you can say it with warmth and kindness, even though it's direct, even though it's specific. And the same thing is true when we're relaying communication to each other in a romantic relationship or our children. To be direct, to be authentic, to be present, to be open, but have warmth in there. Have some warmth, even if you're frustrated, makes an enormous difference.
And bringing it back to questions, when you were speaking, what came to mind for me was that a reflective listening response is, as opposed to a question, has inherent to the reflective listening response is more caring. Why? Because a question is about me. If I'm asking you a question, Elliott, it's something I want to know. It's about me. When I reflectively respond to what you shared with me, it's about you. And so right away, whether we're talking, again, clients, whether we're talking romantic partners, whether we're talking friends, my reflective listening is an effort to keep the focus on you, which communicates warmth, concern, and love for you. A question Even if I'm thinking I'm really asking this for your benefit, it still makes it about me. I want to know this.
Yes. And it sometimes is not safe. It feels
No.
unsafe. And so,
Right.
depending on the relationship, if you don't have a good relationship or you're an authority again, and this
Mhm.
person has done something potentially wrong, or they know they're in trouble per se, it's like, how many times did the deans who were in charge of discipline for young, crazy Elliott ask me questions like this? Let's think I'm 10. Like when I unscrewed a bunch of the seats in the school bus for fun. And, no one got hurt, thankfully, but, it's pretty stupid. But what is the standard thing a dean would take a 10-year-old boy and why did you do that?
Mhm.
What were you
Right.
thinking?
Right.
Do you really think I was thinking? Do you really think I was thinking? No, I wasn't thinking. I didn't even have like the screwdriver with me. I found it. It was sitting in the bus. It's not like I premeditated at age 10, sitting at the table eating Golden Grams. I think I'm going to unscrew the seats of the bus today. That's not what impulsive ADHD spazzy boys like to do. And so just avoiding those kind of questions where what can I answer at that moment that would possibly make me feel safe and helpful,
Mm-hmm.
And so there was people in my life at Doherty and Doherty Middle School and Seven Hills that did a fantastic job connecting with me as a person as they wondered through connection statements why certain things were taking place or what those scenarios were.
Well, it's interesting you bring up the why question, because I would teach my students that once they had learned their reflective listening and had really exercised that skill and felt very competent with it, even in a Rogerian context, Rogers might say never would he ever ask a question, but I think many Rogerian therapists would say, yeah, I'll ask a question here and there. But I would tell them the one question that's totally off limits, if you really practice this orientation, is a why question.
Yeah.
Why immediately puts someone on the defense? Why assumes that someone had some cogent rationale for what they did? Even you don't have to be a 10-year-old kid eating Golden Grams. Yeah. You can be a 60-year-old adult who's lived a lot of life, and we still don't always fully know why we do what we do. Yeah. And it immediately demands this response. It puts someone on the defense immediately. So I think that with our friendships and relationships in general, we could work at trying to remove the why question. We could frame it in a different way that's less threatening, less attacking. But I know if someone asked me, why would you do that right now? Like if Dan just said, why would you do that? Like if I come home and I bought something for dinner or whatever the case may be, and he's like, why would you do that? I mean, immediately, like, it's so degrading. Even if he says it with love, like, why would you do that, honey? I'm gonna be like, well, I need to defend myself right now. And why are you got me? I feel like I'm going to attack. Yeah. You've attacked me, right? It's a totally normal human response to go, put up the barrier. Like, so when we talk about relationships, that's immediately putting up this barrier between couples who are trying to deepen their intimacy.
One of my favorite phrases for the why question.
Yeah.
Is walk me through the process of what led to that movement or what led to that, that outcome. Mm-hmm. I won't even call it decision always. Mm-hmm. Walk me through the process. Someone wants to kind of join. And a lot of times what happens, it happened, I had a session right before the podcast, and I asked the guy a walk through me process question with him. He had a relapse as an addict and he's doing great now. And he's 6 weeks sober again. But I was asking him a bunch of those. We were really going through the HALT acronym. The triggers: HALT, hungry, angry, lonely. What's the T? I just lost the T.
Tired.
Thank you. It wasn't even hard. Right. Ironically. And then, so I said, walk me through the process about this. And he immediately sat back, leaned completely back, shut his eyes, and took about 30 seconds. And he's as spazzy and hyper as I am. And so it was beautiful. Once he came up, he goes, that just gave me a different reflection. We were talking about anger and self-condemnation. And I'm like, walk me through that process for you when this result happened or whatever. And he goes, I think I really was angry. It's the first time I'm really acknowledging. I think I was angry about that. And I think I understand that better. And I'm going to process some more. And so I wanted to ask why, right? Based on, I'm trying to be careful with saying too much, but walk me through it, or let me hear some of the understandings. There's just general ways that you can say it. It has a little question in it, but it's still a phrase.
Right.
It's just much, much better.
You know, I've heard something recently, and I think it's interesting, again, just as we kind of wrap up, bringing it back to relationships and couples. And what do you think of this, Elliott? Because I've heard this recently. So say that Dan does something and it's bothering me. Like, why would you do that? Instead of putting the question on him, I could share with more openness on my end. Because of course we have the safety in our marriage. I could say something like, the story I'm telling myself is, you did this because.
Yeah.
So
very, very helpful. It's secondary. It's a byproduct response.
And it's owning, this is my response to this. And the story I'm telling myself, so I could be way off, but I'm at least letting him know, like, the story I'm telling myself is, you did this because it was more important for you to get your workout in than to come home on time so that we could do the event we had this night. I'm just making this up out of my head. I should give a real example. Examples are always better when they're real, by the way. When I would teach my students, I wouldn't let them do role plays with each other that weren't real issues.
No, I do the same thing. You got to pick something that's real to your heart.
Yeah. So sorry. Next, we're landing this plane, so I won't bother right now. But
well, the last part I want to say is I teach my couples to talk about perception rather than you did this or you hurt me. Get away from the yous and just talk. It's my perception here that you were frustrated that I was late. Just something you and Dan might wrestle with. My perception here, Dan, is that you're frustrated that I was late. Is that accurate or something? You're actually asking for affirmation of the perception. And a lot of times Dan could go, well, yes, I am frustrated. Otherwise he goes, no, not at all. I actually wasn't even thinking about that. I had a bad round. I'm frustrated with my last round. I'm just another competitive athlete who can be impacted by his round. Right. So something like that. But couples that struggle with the attacks and struggle to get escalating super fast and have a history of that, trying to help them learn perception language to gain perspective.
Yep.
The perception perspective window.
Right. And the perception, the story you're telling yourself is essentially a perception.
Absolutely. So, that's why I think it's effective.
It's another way of saying that, which I do think is, I just liked that whole, because I thought, gosh, we do run around with a bunch of stories in our head sometimes. And do we always check in with the person? We don't. So.
No, and we believe it. Whatever that story is, Karen, our brain believes it. Just like we can't get thinking and say things about the future all the time. I'll never get to this. Because your brain thinks it's real, thinks it's present. So the story I'm hearing, that's a great way to build it.
I like that. I heard that recently. All right, Elliott, let's pray it out for, I don't know. You handle the prayer however you want, but I'm just thinking, just kind of like to button this up, we're talking about trying to think about ways to interact on a communication level without always using questions. And I would invite all of the listeners to give it a go. Try it with a very low key, maybe relationship where there's not a whole lot of pressure, that you could just feel like, because it might feel awkward at first if you're used to that more back and forth with questions. So it might be something fun to try to work on, and then just consider the power of validation and creating safety through that reflection rather than the questioning.
Amen to that. Lord, we thank you for this time to talk about therapeutic conversations and expressing warmth and care and love and attention and attunement to anyone we're talking with, but especially those in our inner circle, our spouses, our partners, our best friends, our children, our parents. Lord, those perceptions, when you have the historical relationship, are even more difficult at times. There's a lot of baggage sometimes, a lot of memories. And so, Lord, help us to think of the statements, think of ways to reflectively think, to listen and seek affirmation and confirmation of what you're hearing, perception phrases like Karen's example. Lord, and make sure we care, and that if we're not in a good place, we're not regulated, if we're dysregulated in a trauma response, or we're just too angry or even too sad, that we just take a moment, seek some grounding, seek some regulation, and then allow that relationship, Lord, to build and grow each other in positivity and affirmation, and to seek that kind of opportunity, Lord, to build relationship, build community. So we pray for all our listeners and all their family activities, their community work, Lord, that we could just all be better communicators, stronger communicators, and use statements and use reflection over questions and accusations. In your name, Lord Jesus, amen.
Amen.
Love and Life with Dr. Karen and Pastor Elliott is produced by Tim May and executive producer, Dr. Karen Anders-Nabel. For more information about Love and Life, please go to loveandlifemedia.com.